Number 10. Jean Grey was resting the whole time. After Jean Grey died as part of the Phoenix Saga, everyone was left flabbergasted. During the story, we'd seen Jean merge with the Phoenix Force, become insanely powerful, lose control over this power, become corrupted and dark, basically become a huge supervillain, and finally sacrifice herself, knowing that if she didn't, it would only end badly. Or worse than badly, because it was already pretty bad. Jean Grey, one of the original X-Men team, was dead. Or so it seemed. Later on, Marvel would want to revive the original X-Men team and bring them together on a new team and comic series called X-Factor. So Jean needed to come back to life. But hey, she was dead. So we got the added story to explain that the version of Jean that had died wasn't really her, but was a separate entity known as Phoenix. Sort of this merged thing. Wasn't really Jean. Jean herself was resting comfortably in a pod beneath the ocean, still lived, and would be able to return. Yay. Number 9. Tony Stark was adopted. Yep, that's a thing that happened. I'm just wondering if this one will show up in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I can't deny that if we get an Arno as a result, an Arno Stark, I would actually not be too upset with that, even though this retcon's pretty weird. The reason this retcon was such a terrible retcon for Tony was that his parents and their loss always remained a great catalyst and huge emotional plot point for him. Now, of course, just because he was adopted doesn't mean that he can't still love his parents as much as he did and still be as emotionally affected by their death. That's not what I'm saying. But his parents also had a naturally born son that they hid from Tony, who was born before they adopted Tony, and he also didn't know that he was even adopted. Also, there were aliens and alien tech involved in Arno's birth, which explains why this all had to be a secret, but also it's just a lot. All in all, this revelation greatly changed the way Tony saw his parents and made their relationship more complex. And I don't know if either of those things needed to happen. Number 8. Hail Hydra. One of the most shocking moments in Marvel's comic history was when it was revealed that Captain America was actually a sleeper agent for Hydra the whole time. Say what? The guy who for years was diametrically opposed to Hydra and all their beliefs, who had tried and succeeded to foil their plots countless times, was a Hydra agent? How could this be? Well, apparently all those wins were a part of his doing a very good job to convince us all and trust him so that he could stab us in the back at the right moment and take over America, becoming Hydra Supreme. Fortunately, this evil version of Captain America would later be revealed to have been created by Kobik, a living sentient version of the Cosmic Cube who was manipulated into making this retcon happen. What's more, the true Captain America still existed within the shards of the Cosmic Cube and would return once more to defeat his evil self, fixing the timeline. So, I mean, at least this retcon ended up not staying permanent, but still, it's pretty weird. Number 7. Killed his mother. He just likes to kill everyone in his family pretty much. Granted, his mother did try to kill him when he was born, so this feels almost somewhat poetic. In the series Thanos Rising, we saw more into Thanos' origins and backstory as a youngster. Here we see him become more and more obsessed with death, specifically Lady Death, starting out with a weak stomach but growing to enjoy murdering animals, other children his age, and eventually killing his own mother, searching for something that would help him find who he was. Oddly enough, he thought killing his mother Suisan would make him somehow feel like or become less of a monster? As she had threatened him with a scalpel when he was just a baby, driven mad by his appearance, he also attacked her with one, tying her up and gagging her before cutting her open. Also, what's with that sexy position that she's in when all of that's happening? That's weird. Number 6. Ugly equals evil. That's what Thanos' retcon taught us. Yep. Thanos' backstory was added in detail in the series Thanos Rising, and what many fans were surprised to learn was that his mother was apparently driven mad by her newborn baby's hideous appearance, and because of his appearance, claimed that she needed to kill him. That's pretty terrible. She sensed basically that because he was ugly, he would also be supremely evil. And the really shocking part of this was, of course, that she was right. But also, what the heck? Just because you don't like the look of your baby doesn't mean it should deserve to die. Fortunately, a retcon was later added to fix this when it was changed to it not being the baby's appearance but to a specific deviant gene in the child's genetic code that concerned both of his parents instead. Still, not great just analyzing your baby's genes and being like, we already know you're gonna be evil, but it's better than it just being about the ugliness in appearance as the pure reason for condemnation, I guess. Number 5. Spider-Man's non-sister. So this is kind of another retcon that for me is similar to Nadia's. I like the idea of this character, but the whole story involving her is, well, it's pretty wacky. Teresa showed up in Amazing Spider-Man Family Business claiming to be Teresa Parker, Peter's sister. She believed she was the daughter of Richard and Mary Parker, Peter's parents, and we got a few cool adventures with her, assuming this belief to be true. She was retconned into existence, but honestly, I thought she was kind of a cool retcon to add in, so I was cool with that. However, things got weirder when we learned that the secret sister we'd never heard of till now was all a lie, and that Teresa actually wasn't who she said she was, despite what she herself had been manipulated to believe. It was all a trick, and Mentalo had manipulated Teresa into believing it herself. It was all part of Kingpin's plan to basically lure Peter to a tomb. And we don't actually even know who Teresa's parents are now. It's still a mystery. They even manipulated how Peter saw Teresa, making her appear more like him, so she'd look more like his sister. It's weird. I wish she was actually his sister. That would have been cooler, I think. Number 4. Peter and MJ's marriage never happened. During the story One More Day, Peter made a pact with Mephisto to ensure that his Aunt May would live. Part of this deal was also that people would forget Peter's secret identity, which was currently out in the open. Although it wasn't like a bargain part of the deal, it was just a thing that would happen. But what did Mephisto want in return for this? Peter to never be a hero again? Did he want his soul? No. No, 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 no. He wanted his marriage? Mephisto wanted to take Peter's marriage to MJ. And by that, I don't mean that he wanted himself to marry MJ, which would actually make, in a weird turn of events, more sense. I mean, he wanted to make it so that their marriage never existed. This was such a strange request that many were left speechless when Peter agreed, and this actually happened. What was likely really going on is that Marvel no longer wanted Peter to be married. Or Joe Quesada never wanted Peter to get married in the first place. They wanted to return to the days when Peter was flying free and single, so this story happened to erase it. Number 3. Brought peace to the world. If you don't know Cosmic Ghost Rider, here's the abbreviated version of his backstory. He's basically a superpowered Frank Castle from an alternate world where Thanos killed everyone. He is the power cosmic and is also a spirit of vengeance and a Ghost Rider, likely the last one. He's also been around so long and alone for so long that he's pretty mentally unstable. He was one of the last to stand against Thanos, but eventually ended up joining him because there wasn't really anyone else left to fight alongside, and he realized he couldn't beat Thanos at the end of the day. Cosmic Ghost Rider first appeared in 2016's Thanos series and would get a few mini-series of his own thereafter. His self-titled series shows him stealing baby Thanos so that he might raise him to be better, thereby preventing all the death and destruction we've come to know Thanos for. But even with Cosmic Ghost Rider's insane but well-meaning influence, we learn Thanos cannot be fixed. At first, CGR thinks he succeeded, but he later learns when he runs into Thanos from the future that his Punisher Thanos of a son has somehow grown up to be an even worse tyrant than without his influence, proving that even when people try to raise Thanos right and try to prevent him from becoming some crazy tyrant, it will still always end badly. Thanos forcefully brought peace to the world, and when others resisted his rule, he killed those who opposed him and created internment camps to keep the rebels in. Number 2. Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver were never mutants. If you have been subscribers to our channel for a while, then you likely saw this one coming from a mile away. A list of the worst retcons with Amanda hosting it? I wonder what she's gonna rank high up on that list. And you were right. One of the worst retcons in mutant history for me will always be this. During the events of Axis, it was revealed that Wanda Maximoff and her brother Pyotr, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver respectively, were never the children of Magneto, and as such, never mutants. Instead, we learned that the High Evolutionary abducted them when they were young, experimented on them, and then disguised them as mutants and returned them back to the world. Why? Well, we don't really know, which is part of the reason this is such a terrible retcon. That, and it erased years of meaningful family drama and history, and created a bunch of plot points that no longer really made any sense. Number 1. Snap Wilson. Even worse than my own personal nerd rage towards the retcon of the Maximoff twins, everyone's outrage, my own included, against this retcon. I still can't believe this was a thing that even happened in the comics. Oh my goodness. Sam Wilson in the comics became a good friend of Captain America and was even known as his ally, the superhero Falcon. However, it was revealed that Sam Wilson wasn't actually Sam Wilson, a social worker from New York with falconry skills. This was all a fabrication of the Red Skull, who had used the cosmic cube to turn him into the perfect partner for Captain America as part of an insidious plot. The true persona of Wilson was the criminal, thug, and pimp known as Snap Wilson. What? This would be revealed to Cap as being his true persona, which Cap would then save him from. Yikes. Fortunately, years later we would see a retcon that would basically undo this one, turning the fake persona of Sam Wilson into the real persona for him, and the originally retconned real persona of Snap Wilson into the fake, meaning that Sam Wilson was always Sam Wilson and Snap Wilson was the version created and used by Red Skull. Whew, thank goodness. Number 10. Hank Pym's secret daughter. Nadia Van Dyne is Hank's daughter, who we didn't know existed until 2016. She was introduced in a free comic book day issue about Civil War II. Now of course I like Nadia Van Dyne as a character, don't get me wrong, but her being added in retroactively as Hank's lost daughter was something that I felt like was a bit much. When we learned of Nadia's backstory, we learned that she was the daughter of Hank Pym and his first wife, Maria Travoia. Maria was kidnapped during her and Hank's honeymoon and killed. Nadia ended up being raised in Russia, trained in the Red Room. Eventually she escaped after learning of who her parents really were. By the time she got back to America though to see her father, Nadia learned of his sacrifice to save the world from Ultron and his death as a result. She decided to seek out her stepmother Janet Van Dyne and became close enough to her that she felt compelled to change her own last name to Van Dyne, because that's not confusing at all. She's Hank's daughter, she's not at all related to Janet, and yet she has her last name. Number 9. Falcon's X gene. Remember that time Falcon was revealed to be a mutant and then we explained that origin away with, a faulty sentinel? If you don't, let me explain. In issue 174 of Captain America, we see Professor X meeting Falcon and Cap. Charles implied Falcon's connection to his bird seemed telepathic, and that Falcon's telepathic abilities may be mutant in origin. Falcon himself took this suggestion to heart and even considered what it might mean for him to be a mutant, pondering on his strong, seemingly psychic link to his bird Redwing. He then encountered a sentinel who identified him as a mutant, and so he was a mutant for a time. This was established, and this wouldn't really be revisited or retouched till 2001, where the idea of Falcon being a mutant was tossed in the trash and explained away as a sentinel simply malfunctioning. Wah wah wah. Number 8. Black Widow's confusing backstory. Natasha being a mysterious spy from Russia who switched sides means that yes, we are going to get a complex backstory for her, but it actually wasn't always that complex. Natasha was inspired to fight for her nation originally when her husband was assumed dead in combat. Her husband wasn't really dead of course, and it was implied that this was all part of a plot to basically encourage her to fight for her country. Before that, Natasha was a renowned ballerina. Later on, however, this whole origin was revealed to be a lie when we learned that the Red Room had embedded memories of her being a ballerina in her mind. They made her think she had trained in ballet, but she hadn't really, because I guess that's what the Red Room does, they mess with you and give you fake memories. Her story was also changed from a woman who was inspired by her husband's sacrifice to put her own life on the line for her country as well, to that of a woman being blackmailed and threatened into becoming a spy in order to protect her husband. Number 7. Zorn. Okay, so I was actually going to make the title of this point a little more explanatory, but then I realized how long that would actually make the title of this point. Okay, so Zorn was basically a character who showed up in the comics who was a mutant who always needed to wear a mask. Because of this, we never saw Zorn's face, leading many to wonder who was really under the mask. Although I think most people just thought, well, it's probably a new mutant because, we get new mutants added to the comics every day. But no, of course, this is comics, so it had to be someone. In a dramatic twist, it was Magneto. But no, of course, this is comics, so it had to be someone that we already knew. In a dramatic twist, it was revealed to be Magneto, who had infiltrated Xavier's school in order to rally up mutant support and help him create an army. He then destroyed New York, shot Emma Frost, killed Jean, and was eventually killed by Wolverine. Later on, however, Magneto would turn up again because, well, he's Magneto, and writers wanted to inch him closer to that line between villain and anti-hero again, so they basically retconned Magneto's involvement in all of this. It turns out there was a real Zorn, and it was actually Zorn's brother impersonating Zorn, impersonating Magneto, who was really to blame. Wow. Just wow. Number 6. Thanos. Number 1 dad? Thanos has never really been known as a caring and kind person. Even the people he keeps close to him are never really fully safe from his wrath. Faithful servants, family members, to Thanos, everyone is pretty much disposable. The same could be said for his adopted daughter Gamora, who he hardened and transformed into a killer until she ended up later rebelling. In the 2019 Thanos series, however, we learn how Gamora's relationship with her father was, well, more complex. How he actually, in his own way, was kind of a good father to her. This series also highlights how much they both cared for each other, despite the fact that an Infinity Gauntlet, which happened in the 90s, pre this series, but in terms of continuity would have taken place after this, Thanos seems to not show any regard for his adopted daughter's life. So it's kind of a retcon. Doesn't make a lot of sense. Number 5 influences Thane. This doesn't sound so bad as a title for a point, until you realize just what that influence did. Thane was Thanos' son, whose mother had been an Inhuman. Before Thanos showed up, Thane was a healer and didn't know that he was Thanos' son. Thanos, in his hunt to eliminate the child, demanded the heads of Attilans and therefore the Inhumans' children. This ended with a fight where Thanos fought Black Bolt, and Black Bolt detonated a Terrigen bomb. The bomb was so massive it triggered Terrigenesis in all those who had an Inhuman lineage on the planet Earth's surface, including, you guessed it, Thane. Thane's power was death, and he instantly went from trying to save people to basically killing everyone around him in an instant. Pardon my snapping. Completely unaware of what was happening. He later learned of his legacy and Thanos promised he would kill him. However, Ebony Maw betrayed his master and instead set Thane free and influenced him to accept his destiny and fight his father. Thane did this and won, trapping Thanos. Learning of his heritage and with the influence of the evil Ebony Maw, who was only there due to the fact that he was originally a member of Thanos' Black Order and was originally loyal to him, Thane became a deadly and dangerous villain over time, with power initially rivaling his father's. Number 4. Spider Destiny. Now you know me, I love the Spider-Verse, I love spider totems, but not all fans share my bizarre obsession with the Spider-Verse and Spider-Geddon stories and the villains known as the Inheritors. I swear I'm like the only person that really loves the Inheritors. If you also love them, let me know in the comments. Show yourselves. With these stories came a pretty huge retcon, which basically implied via learning about the Great Web and the spider totems placed within it that every spider, man, or person had a kind of destiny to become that spider person. In other words, Peter Parker didn't have a freak accident, he was actually destined to become Spider-Man. It was fate! Many fans were not a fan of this change to his origins, as they felt it detracted from what makes Peter Parker so appealing, that he's just an average kid who got a freak spider bite that gave him powers, as opposed to it being all ordained. Number 3. Norman Osborn and Gwen Stacy's relationship. This little frightening retcon was added during the Sin's Past story. It also made Peter look like an insensitive jerk, just for good measure as well. The story here that was added in was that Gwen Stacy had an affair with Norman Osborn, a man who was much older than her at the time and who would go on to be responsible for her death. This affair resulted in Gwen becoming pregnant with twins, which she secretly gave birth to. Norman then raised these children, lying to them that they were actually the children of Spider-Man and Gwen, and that Spider-Man had killed their mother, turning them into misguided villains. This was not a retcon anyone needed, but hey, it was one that we got. Number 2. Aunt May's death. Remember when Aunt May died, but it wasn't really Aunt May but an actress who had actually died while impersonating Aunt May? Yeah. That was a weird villainous plot. What we saw in the comics as an elderly Aunt May's death was later retconned into being one of the weirdest and most elaborate plots of Green Goblin's criminal career. It was later revealed that the woman who was dead and buried and who we thought had been Aunt May was actually an elderly actress who happened to be on her deathbed and who had agreed to take on one last role in order to torment Spider-Man? Prove how great of an actress she was? Her motives are pretty foggy. Maybe Green Goblin agreed to pay any surviving relatives of hers a ton of cash? I honestly don't know. What had really happened was this actress had been genetically altered to exactly match Aunt May's genes, meaning no one at the hospital suspected this imposter to be a fake. She died after revealing to Peter that she knew he was Spider-Man and was even buried in Aunt May's intended plot next to Uncle Ben for a time. That is, of course, until we all learned that Aunt May was really still alive and this had been some kind of bizarre ruse. Number 1. Clone Saga. I won't deny that in my time on this channel I've come to actually somewhat love elements of the Clone Saga. I originally disliked Clone Saga when I started working here, but I very much have come to appreciate parts of the story and to acknowledge that without Clone Saga, we wouldn't have some very awesome characters like Ben Reilly and Kane Parker. However, one thing I still cannot get over is how long Marvel spent tricking everyone with this story. People spent 20 years thereabouts thinking they were reading Spider-Man, as in Peter Parker, only to find out that all those stories were not his, but actually belonged to a clone. Granted, at least it was a pretty cool clone who we'd all come to love after. But at the time, this was a pretty shocking and frustrating revelation after years of stories, and it left a lot of fans feeling betrayed at the time. Number 10. Rendered EROS powerless. It's got to be hard being the brother to Thanos. Just ask EROS, aka Star Fox, about it, and I'm sure he'll tell you as much. Star Fox is often presented as being a hero in the comics, and yet despite his own reputation trying to do good at least, he has to live in Thanos' shadow. Of course, EROS has done some questionable things in the past as well, but I still can't help but feel a little bad for him. During the 1991 Infinity Gauntlet miniseries, while Thanos threatens Marvel's greatest heroes, Star Fox is taken prisoner by his brother, who basically rendered him powerless and makes him watch as he torments his fellow superhero colleagues and friends, eventually killing many of them. Though of course, they would return. That is what it's like to be the brother to the Mad Titan though. He takes the phrase of sibling rivalry to a whole new level. Number 9. Kills his own servants. Thanos is not even above killing those who serve him. He has obviously without much remorse killed his own adopted daughter Gamora before in the comics, and in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, although it pained him, he also chose to sacrifice Gamora to get his way and complete his plan. The Black Order, however, are not usually people who betray Thanos, unlike his traitorous daughter. They are usually loyal to a fault, having been tested over the years by Thanos and chosen for their strength, ingenuity, and ruthlessness. However, sometimes their own greed for power gets the best of them. Such was the case when Corvus Glaive ruled the Black Quadrant in Thanos' stead and was made to end his own life upon Thanos' return for basically doing so. He was like, I was just keeping the seat warm, and Thanos was like, nah, I don't believe you, you're dead. Before there was the Black Order, by the way, there was the Butcher Squadron as well, a team which Thanos assembled but would actually choose to murder members of at random for his own reasons. Not really a guy you want to serve, I don't think. Number 8. Killed his father. Mentor is known in the comics as Thanos' father. Alars, aka Mentor, has felt deep and intense guilt for years over his son's actions. At times, Mentor has even tried to intervene to try and fix the disaster and bloodshed that Thanos has wrought. In the end, Thanos grew sick and was dying from an unknown and seemingly uncurable disease. He turned to his brilliant father, an accomplished scientist, for a cure, after exhausting every other option he could think of. Mentor was forced to help Thanos when he threatened the other scientists' lives and the lives of their families who resided on the moon where Alars was living. When pressed, however, Mentor shared that a cure would take years to find, if there even was one, and that he was happy Thanos was finally dying. He only regretted not killing his son himself years ago. This outburst resulted in Thanos having an outburst of his own, and he murdered his father in response. It's not a great relationship. Number 7. Professor X married Mystique. Some retcons that are really strange come from film inspiration. As a lot of people discussed in the comments, many feel that Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, for example, would still be mutants today if it wasn't for their being introduced in the MCU's Avengers franchise, which didn't have the rights to include mutants, so we had to kind of unmutant them. I feel as though the case was possibly similar for this weird, secret retcon. In 2013's Uncanny X-Men issue 24, we learned of Mystique and Charles Xavier's secret marriage, meaning that the child we saw Mystique gave birth to while in the guise of Moira McTaggart was likely one willfully conceived, as opposed to Mystique tricking Charles into sleeping with her, which would have been super weird and pretty not good in my opinion. In the X-Men prequel films such as First Class, which came out in 2011, we see a different kind of relationship between Raven and Charles. We get this weird love triangle between Charles, Raven, and Eric, and it seems more of that likely influenced this weird retcon plot point revealed in the comics in Charles's will. Number 6. Child Killer. You wouldn't think that Thanos would make a great father, and he doesn't really. But that hasn't stopped him from siring many children throughout the galaxy and adopting others at times. Gamora is his adoptive daughter, but he also has a naturally born son named Thane. In fact, Thanos even attempted to find his son at one point during Infinity. He didn't want to find him to reconnect though, or repair a lost or severed connection. He wanted to find his son in order to kill him. Not knowing where to look, he decided the best course of action was to kill as many children within Thane's possible age group as possible. Thanos disguised this plot as one of conquest, ordering planets to pledge fealty to him and offer a tribute of the heads of their youths between the ages of 16 to 22. Number 5. Doom is never wrong. Some people like Dr. Doom a little too much. I'm probably guilty as being one of those people. To the point that they can't let him be flawed. Doom must be perfect. Well, while Doom may believe that, the reality is it's his flaws that actually help to make him such a great character, and also are important because they are a part of the reason for his villainous nature. Originally, his vendetta started against the Fantastic Four, and more specifically Reed Richards, years ago, when Reed tried to give him pointers on a device he was building. Reed warned Doom that it was unstable, but Doom didn't listen. The device ended up exploding because, well, Richards had been right, scarring Doom's face. Unable to blame himself due to his huge ego, Doom decided to blame Reed, and thus a villain was born. However, retcons have come into play a few times in regards to his origins as to whose fault the device exploding really was. In one retcon, it's actually implied that it's Mephisto's fault, but if that's true, then why has Doom hated Reed so much for pretty much forever? Another retcon implied that Ben Grimm possibly intentionally sabotaged Doom's machine, which is an even worse retcon because it makes Grimm, normally a very lovable character, look like a jerk. Both of these retcons help to buff out Doom's flaws at the expense of making his feuds illogical. Number 4. Mass extermination policy. We all know Thanos as someone who is heartless, ruthless, and who kills to get closer to his one true love, Lady Death. And yet there is another reason he sometimes is known as a mass exterminator when it comes to various species and alien worlds. In the 2019 Thanos series, we see him going up against one of his greatest foes, Magus, and we see how he attempts to prevent Magus from expanding his universal Church of Truth, a much more evil religion than it sounds, let me tell you, by killing everyone, in order to prevent Magus from ever being able to convert them. You can't convert people if they're dead. While really joining Magus's church also is not an ideal scenario anyways, killing them to prevent this is intense and cruel. In truth, Thanos has always enjoyed killing, so to him it's likely like hitting 3 birds with 1 stone. He not only gets to rob Magus of converts, but also gets to revel in death, and also gets closer to Lady Death through killing. Yay! Number 3. Kang. Sometimes we talk about retcons that are ridiculous because they hurt the overall story. Other times there are retcons that feel like they don't really need to happen, and then there are those that just cause more confusion than really necessary. That's sort of the case with Kang. Kang the Conqueror was a villain who was first introduced in Avengers issue 8 in 1964. He is known for being a time-traveling villain who enjoys sitting and floating around while menacing other people. As time went on, however, we'd come to discover due to the fact that he's a time traveler, the Kang was actually a bunch of other people, including Immortus and even Iron Lad. While these retcons were sometimes interesting, they don't really add much to his story, and at this point Kang being revealed as just about anyone is so old hat, it's kind of lost its shock value as well. Now we're gonna get him in the MCU. I don't know what that's gonna be like. Could be weird, could be great. Number 2. Sacrifices millions for the love of a lady. In the comics, Thanos merely wielded the Infinity Gauntlet and snapped those out of existence to simply get closer to Lady Death, who he was wooing. That's right, in the comics the snap was simply an attempt to impress his eternal crush. Killing billions just for a chance at love with someone? A chance? That's pretty terrible if you ask me. Number 1. Killed Death. If this feels like a paradox, well, it kind of is. But we need to remember, in the Marvel Universe, for Thanos anyways, Death is not just a concept, but is also a person, Lady Death, his love. In an alternate universe, however, Death and Thanos have a different relationship, less of an unrequited love story, as Death is posing as Thanos' mother, until Thanos realizes that Death actually has been lying to him, and takes revenge on her by killing her. This doesn't sound so terrible until you realize the ramification of this action, as Thanos does in the story. Basically, killing Death messes with the whole balance of the universe and everything, which, as we've seen in other alternate worlds like the Cancerverse, can be very bad. Of course, this doesn't go as terribly as the Cancerverse, as this happens in Earth X, an alternate world known as Earth 9997, and we at least don't have the influence of the many angled ones in this alternate world to worry about.